What's up, y'all? Henry Higuita here with another episode of Across the Pitch, where it ain't our first rodeo with Lucho Acosta. The guy might be tiny, but he's packed a punch against the Five Stripes in the past, and he's going to be back in town this weekend with his new team, FC Dallas. And we'll talk a little bit more about Lucho in just a second. But first, let me introduce this week's guest, founder of GOLZ TV, Jose Tellez. Jose, what's going on, man?
Henry, what's going on, man? I appreciate the invite. Fan of the show, and look, any chance I get to collab, talk FC Dallas specifically, I'm locked in, bro. I'm locked in. Thanks again for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for hopping on. So really quick, let's dive into things. Give me a little bit of background on FC Dallas's 2024. I know it probably wasn't what y'all wanted, 11th in the West. Tell me a little bit about what happened in that season and what was your verdict?
Oh man, it still hurts hearing anybody say that. Because I'll tell you what, man, I don't think anybody could have predicted it. I think you go into last season, especially on the back of signing someone as prolific as Petar Musa. We kind of felt like that was maybe the missing piece, the missing link, right? We kind of had Ferreira up there trying to do his thing as a hybrid slash false nine or striker. And so we had someone now to truly be that clinical piece up top. And you think, okay, 2024 should be great. I'm excited. And whether it's a combination of injuries, players just falling out of form, the coach not really having answers. And we saw how that turned out for Nico Estevez midway through the season. Things kind of fell apart and unraveled very, very quickly. And I think what we realized, kind of with how 2024 ended, don't get me wrong, there were some bright spots in there, right? Taking down teams like the LA Galaxy, beating Austin FC 2 out of the 3 times that we played them, didn't really matter at the end of the day, missed playoffs. And of course, this being a results oriented business, Nico Estevez was out. And I think what we determined as a club was in the offseason, we had to find a way to retool this roster entirely, change the mindset, figure out a way to figure out a way to overhaul the squad without it feeling like a true rebuild, right? Because we all know a rebuild can feel like a loss in its own way, right? It can feel like, okay, now we have to be patient. Now it's going to take time for us to get back to where we were. That's not what FC Dallas fans were hoping for, transitioning from 2024 to 2025. So all in all, man, not the season most of us expected. There were a few bright spots here and there. I think even when Estevez got let go and, we brought in the interim manager, Lausanne, I think is how you say it in French. He did a pretty bang up job for him not being a credentialed manager. But again, I think he was just kind of picking up the pieces. And for anybody who paid attention to FC Dallas in the offseason, you can kind of see what the end result was, a completely overhauled squad. And I think it was very much necessary.
Now, you just led into it, the coaching change. FC Dallas, obviously one of the MLS clubs that entered the season with a new manager. We're talking about Eric Quill here. First of all, tell me a little bit about your first reaction to him being announced as FC Dallas's head coach, and then tell me a little bit of what he's done. I know it's been a very short amount of time, but what has he done with the team so far?
Yeah, I'll be honest. I mean, Eric Quill, I had heard his name as a manager previously. So for all those S Dallas fans who tune into Third Degree, shout out Third Degree. Buzz doing a great job with his show over there. So one, I was familiar with Eric Quill because if you don't know, he's a former Dallas Burn player, right? MLS 1.0 Dallas Burn. He had a stint at the club. I think he very much is the most FC Dallas hire ever, right? Someone who understands what it means to be at this club, understands that how we operate, right? The Hunts are not an ownership group that is quick to splash a ton of cash. In fact, we like to build kind of from within. Our identity has always been rooted in our academy and how many youngsters we can really bring up to the first team who can seamlessly fit right in because they're really just playing in the same system at a higher level. And so, that's always been who we are. And so when I thought about which candidates were out there going into the offseason, even Peter Lusson included, who was the interim manager to close out 2024, I thought it was probably going to be someone with some type of identity similar to ours in terms of understands what it means to be at this club. And so when we got Quill, again, I had heard his name probably a couple weeks before the announcement actually came in. And all I knew was that he had created some waves at New Mexico United, right, in the USL Championship. What I also heard at the same time was while no one could really lay out what his true tactics were as a manager, everyone seemed to resonate with the mentality he brings, right? That's what he was. He's a mentality guy. And I think that as a young manager, and I'll consider him a manager still early in his career, at least there's that, right? And I do think that that's what this team coming off of a horrendous 2024 really needed, was a major shift in mentality. And so I didn't know what tactics he would bring. I'm even subtly surprised with the first almost 2 months of the season, what I've seen so far in good and bad ways. It's not necessarily like I'm being critical of the manager up to this point. I think we're still very early. But I think that what he has brought in spades is this shift from, I don't want to say a victim mentality, but I feel like we got really down on ourselves post 2024 to kind of this dog mentality, right? That we got to go back and take what's ours. We got to go back and earn the respect of every team we let walk all over us in 2024. And we need to bring in players who embody that through and through. And we'll talk about him later, but I think Lucho Acosta, I feel fortunate that he's playing here at FC Dallas. I think that most of the fan base feels that way, that we're lucky to have him. And I think he embodies exactly what Eric Quill, at least from a mentality standpoint, is looking for with this team and trying to build up. Tactically, it's a different story. I think he's much more direct, much more pragmatic, not the possession-based coaches Dallas is kind of used to having in its past. But regardless, it's a results-oriented business, and if we have to take this new approach under Quill to get where we want to go, I'm okay with that.
A results-oriented business. Part of that business is the transfers, and y'all were busy. Oh my gosh, dude, y'all were busy this winter. But let's talk a little bit about some of the highlights. For me, obviously, the biggest one has to be signing Lucho Acosta. He had many suitors from reports during his saga, and now you guys ended up with him. He's got 3 goals in 6 games so far, including one in your most recent 2-1 win over Sporting Kansas City that got Peter Vermees fired.
Yeah.
How's Lucho Acosta changed things for y'all?
Man, you know what's crazy is that the best analogy I could give is that I used to say that the best part about Jesus Ferreira's game when he was with Dallas was, if he may not have had, I think there's only one season where he bagged 18 plus goals in a year. Outside of that, he contributes all over the field with key passes, assists elsewhere. But I kind of always felt, especially against our biggest opponents, almost similar to Nkosi Tafari, just had this clutch gene, right? And like when we needed them to turn up against our biggest opponents to salvage some pride, whatever it may be, those guys were always kind of there. May not have been super consistent throughout the entire season, but they were at least there in those moments. I think Lucho Acosta takes that to another level. I think that we now, for the first time in I don't know how long, have a truly MVP caliber player on FC Dallas, not just from the physical or technical standpoint on the pitch, but even, like I said before, with the mentality that he brings. You can just tell that he holds himself to this ridiculous bar on the field. Both technically, I've seen him in moments where he loses the ball and he's so hard on himself in the moment and kind of picks it back up. You could just see him shake it off and get ready for the next one. And again, even with the play itself, right? When we went down to Sporting Kansas City as the most recent example, who's the first one to step up? And, I think there were even moments in that run up to that goal where I don't think he was comfortable with the decisions Musa was taking. He was taking a lot of players on by himself before he gave that pass to Lucho. I think Lucho wanted it a little bit earlier. But again, right? Like, he understands, he's played this game a long time, understands where he needs to be in those moments so he can clutch up. And I'll say it again, man, I feel like we're very fortunate as a fan base to have someone of the caliber of Lucho Acosta captaining this side and leading our team out in the field week in and week out.
That's a huge step. And I mean, the best part I think about that is the partnership that he can develop with Petar Musa, a guy who had 17 goals last season. Tell me a little bit, have y'all seen that partnership start to develop? I know it's early, but have you seen that start to show up a bit?
A bit, yeah. I will say, I think you see it in moments like, again, I'll reference the goal against Kansas City where they were able to link up in a great way, and Musa gets the assist, Lucho gets the goal. But then you also see, again, just these growing pains from only being in the first couple months with each other. As an example, Musa, because of how deficient we were in the midfield last season to an extent. He in this team, if you watch him off the ball, he drops in pretty deep to get it. Like he's kind of sitting in that 8 or 10 position sometimes to collect the ball and then generate the counter attack in transition to move forward and create an opportunity. He doesn't need to do that, I think, as much with Lucho Acosta, but we still see him in those habits, right? Like it's taking a little bit of time to get there. So, but that was expected. I don't think with you see on your screen how many departures and arrivals we had this offseason. I think the Lucho Musa connection is just a byproduct of how new this team is all the way around, right? I think it's going to take some time. 3-4 months before we can really start to see connections being made, not just between Musa and Acosta, but I think all over the pitch. I think once we get our starting wingers settled into who those two guys are going to be, because there's a lot of rotation on the wings game over game right now. That's going to be very interesting, right? Connecting with our outside backs. I think Lucho finding Leggett in certain spaces, receiving the ball from Ramiro in certain spaces. You know, those connections just get made with more reps. And so right now, I think we have to play the way that we're playing because there isn't that super strong connection and gelling just yet. But even then, you could see flashes. You could definitely see flashes throughout this game, and that's why I think we're throughout this team, and that's why I think we're kicking off 2025 significantly better than we kicked off 2024.
Let's talk about the outgoings. I want to call it a blockbuster trade in some sorts. The Jesus Ferreira and Paul Arriola going to Seattle. In exchange, Dallas gets Leo Chu, a truckload of GAM, and some other stuff. What were your thoughts on it was two separate trades, but what were your thoughts on that? And do you think it was worth it?
You know, that's a great second question. Let me give my thoughts first. I think in general, I'm content with how the trades went through, the two big ones, right? I think with Jesus Ferreira, the reason it wasn't as big of a blow to this fan base mentally is because we already were teased a bit, right? For those who remember before the 2024 season, MLS blocked that transfer offer from a team in the Russian Pro League, and you know, when that happened, I thought to myself, well, there goes probably a big chance to coop in some cash, but we also would have lost arguably our best player at the time. So, you know, it kind of evens itself out. He's going to be here. But then when the rumors of Musa really kind of came to the forefront, I actually thought that deal was contingent upon Ferreira moving out. So part of me was like, it was a very bittersweet moment. We were missing out on a European striker that I thought was clinical and could have helped us in a big way because we didn't sell Ferreira, and we still bought him anyway. Now, if you hindsight's 2020, but if you go through 2024, you look back, the 17 goals Musa scored didn't really matter all that much. We didn't make playoffs. But with that said, I think moving him on, it was the right time. I think Ferreira's done everything he possibly could for the most part for FC Dallas. Didn't quite hit the heights that his dad did, right? With the FC Dallas team he played for back in 2010 when they made the MLS Cup final. But nonetheless, had a stellar career here. And from the lens of a homegrown product, he has set the bar for what we want academy products to strive for as they think about breaking into the first team at some point. So all in all, man, we'll go down as some sort of a legend here in FC Dallas. It was a blockbuster trade from my perspective. I think Seattle got a great player, a player who's MLS proven. But with that said, getting Liao Chu back in return, right? And getting a winger that I thought I still think there's so much potential with. I think he was just scratching the surface with Seattle. No one really saw what he's fully capable of, and I'm hoping Quill can get the best out of him for that. Arriola, I'll be honest, man, I was critical of him in his last 2 seasons with Dallas. In more than a few ways. If anybody watches the GOLZ TV channel, you could probably see me last couple seasons, people will say hating on Arriola. It's just, I felt like he had kind of run his course, right? That he was maybe ready for better surroundings. And I don't know, like from the moment he got rejected by the U.S. men's national team for the World Cup roster, it just felt like he slowly slid downhill a little bit. Had his moments, of course, right? But the production just wasn't matching up to, at one point, a DP spot he was taking up. And so moving him on, I think, just also makes all the sense in the world. But then, of course, right, the other trade in terms of bringing in Julio, I thought was massive. Nothing against Sam Juka. That guy's one of the best utility players I think Dallas has had in quite some time. He played all over the pitch. but we needed someone who can offer verticality like Julio. And it just so happens that last season, this guy dunked on us with like a 50-yard screamer. And now we get to play with him, right? So, yeah, I thought that was a fantastic move as well. And of course, the cash for player trade to get Lucho. I've already talked a lot about him. He was just a no brainer. So, all in all, I will say it was worth it, but I think time will still tell, right? Like it's still kind of early. We're getting Lucho at 30 years old. Some will say that he's already past his best. There's a lot of holes you can poke in our strategy. Um, but I think at the end of the day, like I'm still pretty overall content with the business that we've done in the offseason.
There's one that I also want to talk about. A big name that came in summer of 2023, Asier Yaramendi. And he didn't continue with the team this season. What was it with him? Was it just a lack of production? What happened there?
I actually think he played very well. I think it's a combination of two things. I think it's one, Yara is it's his age, right? So one is like I think how Quill likes to play defensively. There's a ton of work rate that's required to be successful in an Eric Quill system. We can see that defensively. It's very aggressive, very high press. At Yara Mendy's age, it just we even saw it last season. It just wasn't all the way there. He's a much better playmaker distributing from that midfield than he is a closing down pressing midfielder, if that makes sense. But then two, he's also a Nico Estevez guy, right? Like I actually thought when Austin signed Nico Estevez as their new manager that Yaramendi was going to head to Austin. I really believe that. And it still might be possible. I'm not sure if he signed with his next team just yet. But, you know, I think I don't think any SC Dallas fan was dissatisfied or unsatisfied with Yaramendi's performances. You know, he could have been more available at times, but at the same time, with his age, that was to be expected. So, yeah, man, I mean, no complaints on Yaramendi's part, but I do think that it was a combination of he was with Dallas because of Nico Estevez, and he didn't make sense for the profile of team Eric Quill wanted to build in 2025.
Now, before we move on from the transfers, are there any other ones that you really want to talk about?
The only other one outgoing that I'll say that I thought was going to get more attention, and it sort of did, but just because he was a young DP, which is Alan Velasco, I think that he's someone, you know, when you think about it, right? Dallas basically lost. They did lose two of their three DPs, and one of those guys was so electric on the field. Pace, power, clutch factor to an extent. Alan Velasco had a lot of the intangibles you like in a player, but still nonetheless lacked a little bit in the production department. But man, with him coming off an ACL injury, the bit of business that we did with him, getting him out the door for 12 million from Boca Juniors, that's actually insane to me. Like I've been very critical of Andre Zanota as a GM, and I feel like that's something that didn't get enough attention. It was a coup, in my opinion. We actually got a heck of a deal just getting him out the door and creating more opportunities for Quill to really, really put his stamp on this roster and be able to spend in the future. So that to me was a big one.
So Quill got a chance to build his roster, and now he's in the middle of this season. Let's talk about it. Dallas so far 3-1-2 in 2025, 7th in the West with 10 points in 6 games. What are your thoughts on the team's performances so far?
It's the bipolar opposite of last year. For those who remember, we didn't win our first road match until a couple of months left in the season. I think we had one win and a draw on the road all season long. It's the exact opposite this year. We are undefeated on the road. We've only won one of the 3 games we played at home. So it's a weird spot to be in. I think still a positive start to this season. We are much more direct than we've been in previous seasons. And I think that's a good and a bad thing. Much more good than bad, but I think there is a very obvious way to play against this Dallas team. And I think, you know, a lot of teams can kind of see that. It's just a matter of Quill, you know, kind of imprinting his mentality on this team and letting that kind of be the path to winning these games. All in all, I'm not mad at the start, although I do think we've just dropped a game or two here. I think the biggest telling of that was the Chicago Fire game at home, up 1-0 and found a way to give up 3 goals in the final 10, 15 minutes. I think Eric Quill is showing at times that the biggest gaps from his perspective as a manager are really going to be with managing the game itself. I think the mentality is there. You can see it across the players. Everybody's bought in. I think everyone knows what they have to do. And I think we have those 2 or 3 individual players who can offer the quality, even if things aren't going our way. But then it's just those decisions, right? In the second half, who do you bring off? How does that impact the team? And in moments throughout the season already, we've seen it negatively affect FC Dallas. So again, it's picking out 1 or 2 moments out of the 7 games that we've had. But again, those can stack up if we don't learn from them. And so seeing him take accountability when those moments popped up, and I'm sure it resonates with the players, with the fan base. It definitely gives us more motivation going into a game like this, because if this was 2024, I'm not sure how we would have approached this massive game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Let's talk about that massive game at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. That's going to happen this Saturday. You're predicted 11. Let's take a look.
I think, our backline, our keeper are pretty standard except for one person. So for those not familiar, Martin Boss, keeper through and through, not going anywhere, despite the fact that Coyote as a backup, had his debut and played phenomenally against Salt Lake. But Shaq Moore, proven better at the right back spot, not going to change. Ibiaga and Yuroride, which, by the way, that signing that we made in Yuroride, fantastic. I didn't know what to expect watching his tape from Amiens in Ligue 1 or Ligue 2, I think it was in France. But I am really, really liking what I see so far. The aggression, the ball playing ability, the decision making at times. From my perspective, he is the established CB1 after losing a guy like Nkosi Tafare. But the big one's Nolan Norris, man, at left back. We saw his debut at a left back position last week against Kansas City. I thought he played fairly well. But he's having to do this because our starting left back, Marco Farfan, it was just announced this past week that he'll be out for 2 months. Had to have surgery that he's kind of just sort of prolonged up to this point. Sounds very, very similar to how we lost Paxton Pomacall last season. So, that's unfortunate. But with that said, I've kind of been screaming for Nolan Norris to get more minutes, preferably at the center mid position where I know he can play defensive mid as well. But moving from defensive mid or defensive minded midfielder to left back is not the craziest shift mentality wise in the world to make. And so I'm excited to see him grow in this spot and see what he can offer us. But I will say, for those who are going to be watching him, and I think Atlanta fans probably hear this and say that's who we should be targeting, right? Is a young, inexperienced left back. He also is aggressive. He's prone to getting yellow cards. So that's probably a spot where I see Atlanta United trying to target with guys like Miguel Almiron or whoever else is on that side. That's going to be a very telling matchup. Moving into the midfield, again, I think the triangle in the midfield, if you will, the 2 defensive mids and the attacking mid are right now our stable 3. Like, that's not going anywhere. Ramiro acts as more of a defensive mid. He's there simply to break up play. I think if he's not asked to do anything else, it's great. I love Ramiro. He's 31 years old. In my opinion, loses legs right around the 75th minute most games. And so I don't think we should be asking anything more of him. I think just having him be a destroyer, breaking up play, that's what we really want. Leggett right next to him to be the 8 that pushes up the field, right? That works with Lucho and our wingers to create opportunities for Musa. And I think he's been solid this season. I think at times he's lacked a little bit of pace, but Leggett for me gets the ball done with his ability to distribute, his ability to dribble. The assist he got on Leao Chu's goal against Kansas City is a perfect example. He completely burned an outside back. I didn't even know he still had the legs like that. But at the end of the day, Leggett to me is very, very solid in the midfield. And then, of course, in front of both of them, Lucho. And he's going to be everywhere. We'll ask him to do quite a bit, as we always do. But he'll be there to link up and be the bridge between Musa and Leggett. And then, on the outside, these are the biggest question marks. I will say, when you look at this 11, these are the 2 that I'm most hesitant on when someone asks me about a predicted 11. I picked Leao Chu on the right because, frankly, he scored his first goal for FC Dallas last week. And I think Quill will want to see that through, right? You're never going to bench a player who's starting to kind of pick up form. I think we'll put him out there again. And if he can't prove that he's getting it done in 60, 65, 70 minutes, we'll see someone like Logan Ferry to come on the pitch. That's probably what will happen. I think Julio on the left has a longer leash, right? Like, I think that he's been out for a few weeks because of a green card issue. He's back. This is his first game back after not playing for 2 or 3 weeks. And so it'll be great to kind of see him now. And I think we've been kind of waiting to get him back on the pitch. So I feel like he will start in this one, and it'll be a vertical play through and through, right? Just kind of sending him long balls over the top and to contribute defensively to help out Nolan Norris, especially if he's lining up against Almiron. And then finally, of course, Musa. I'm hoping that we get to see him on the score sheet, of course, but I would say I'm hoping that we see him a little bit less in the midfield. I'd like to see him holding his true central striker position more often than not to challenge center backs and make them uncomfortable. But we'll see. That's one of the growing pains that I referenced earlier in this episode or in this video. Is just that sometimes him and Lucho almost step on each other's toes because they're both trying to get the ball in similar positions. And so I'm hoping that there's just a little bit more chemistry between those two in this game.
Now, one of Dallas's offseason acquisitions that is featured in this 11 is Georgia native Shaq Moore. He's coming back home for this game. What does he bring to this Dallas side?
Consistency. I think more than anything else. I think Shaq Moore is not the flashiest right back by any stretch of the imagination. But when you watch him play, he's consistent, right? He's constantly, even when he's pushed all the way up the pitch, getting back, contributing defensively because he is a defender at the end of the day. Finding ways to close down wingers without having to rely on his athleticism, right? So what I mean by that is the space he gives them, some of the body feints he throws in there to kind of get them to make the first move. You could just tell he's an MLS proven veteran, and that's what he brings, right? Last season, we didn't have that kind of experience, so consistency is something that we lacked. Even if someone like Giovanni Jesus, who's was our starting right back last season, even if he technically is more athletic, maybe more technically gifted, whatever the case may be, it's the intelligent side of Shaq Moore that I think would allow him to kind of gel with this version of FC Dallas a little bit better. So yeah, man, I think Shaq Moore, I mean, for me, the three staples in that back line are him along with our two center backs. And so I don't see that changing. I think he's going to have to be big for us again in this game.
So you touched on it a little bit earlier, but talk me through some of Dallas's strengths and weaknesses going into this game.
To start with the weaknesses, I think it has to be, I know I just kind of talked about those three staples in the back line, but they're still gelling, right? And I think also the tactics themselves are from Quill's side are still being shaped. And so right now, I think our back line is our Achilles heel. And what I mean by that is primarily in transition, right? So when for a team that's as aggressive and presses as high as we do, we leave spots open in the back. And when that happens, Shaq Moore sometimes isn't the quickest defender to get back. Yorogide gets pulled out of positions as a center back significantly, quite a bit actually. Ibeaga is a shorter center back. So when those balls come over the top, to be vertical against Dallas, it doesn't usually pan out that well for Ibeaga, right? Like he can win the occasional header or aerial, but just doesn't happen that often. And I will say especially last season, when crosses came in, it felt like I was always kind of just holding my breath, and just waiting for this ball to hit the back of our net because we weren't going to be able to win that header. And that's still kind of a problem, right? So I think defensively, this back line for Dallas, if I'm being self-critical here, it can be challenged quite a bit. I think Latte Loth, the battle between Latte Loth and Yorogide is going to be an epic one. I really believe that. I think Yorogide is very, very physical. Latte Loth is as well, probably similar in stature and similar athleticism. I really think that that's going to be the duel that we probably lock in on and hone in on the most. But I'll be curious to see how Quill decides to prepare that back line for what's coming. And then on the attacking side, I really think it's just going to be keeping track of the runs that Lucho and Musa are making. That really is. It has to be that because in sneaky ways, again, we don't have possession. We're not a possession-based team anymore. So it's like when we get the ball, if you just watch some of the runs Musa makes to create space for Lucho and vice versa, and once they start moving the ball between each other, what the other one does, that flow state that they kind of get into, I want to see that scale up a little bit in this game because we'll have to challenge this back line. But that's where I can see them being dangerous, right? Is if we can find a way to get them on the same page when Chu is sprinting down the right side with the ball or Julio sprinting down the left side with the ball and we're getting vertical. Musa's also so athletic that I feel like we're going to be able to get balls in behind that back line and then from there see what happens with the shot. But that's what I'm looking for. I think that's where we can try and hurt Atlanta, but we're going to have to be very, very efficient with our chances because we won't get that many. I fully expect Atlanta United to have the lion's share of possession and probably the lion's share of chances.
We'll see how that goes because Atlanta, it tends to have a nasty habit of creating its own problems, as evidenced by some previous games, several mistakes at the back, several moments where the center backs in particular aren't really covering themselves in glory. But we'll see. Maybe they figure that out in this game. I would sure hope so, because I am worried. Lucho Acosta all-time has scored 8 goals against Atlanta United. And Petar Musa, obviously, I mean, his quality is just spectacular. And that partnership can be dangerous for this Atlanta side. Jose, so we do a score prediction challenge amongst us Scarves and Spikes staff, and we got y'all, the guests on this show, involved. Y'all are doing pretty well. I think y'all are in second place right now. So you got to keep going with this. What do you think is going to be the score of this game?
It's a great question. I believe it's going to be the exact same score from 2023, which, if I'm correct, that was a 2-2 draw. That is my prediction for this game. I'm going to say Musa and Julio with the assist from Lucho for both. Now, I think it's important to say that I've also been in this position where, you know, FC Dallas is winning a game against a team they shouldn't be winning against. And then, like, at the very, very end, in the dying seconds, the equalizer comes through and it feels like an L, right? And that's something I'm always just like knocking on wood for, right? Like, please don't let this be one of those moments. Because I know I said before the game I would take a draw. But I would. I think I respect not just Atlanta United, but Ronnie Dyla heavily. And I think I'm aware of what this team and these players are capable of. And so I think if you ask me again before this game starts, Dallas comes in here with a packed crowd, gets a draw, and gets to go back home. Overall, I'm content with that.
Jose, where can people find you?
Oh man, guys, if you're on Twitter, it's Bromigo is my gamer tag. It's my Twitter handle. It's all up there. But otherwise, man, just go follow GOLZ TV at GOLZ.TV. It's also the name of our website, GOLZ.TV. Plenty of content, plenty of creators, and our YouTube channel features a ton of them alongside guys like Eric Winalda. So if you guys love any of that, please come check us out. Let us know what you think. We're always trying to get better, and we appreciate it.
Atlanta United versus FC Dallas, Saturday, April 5th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. If you haven't already, be sure to check our website, scarvesandspikes.com. We got news, opinion, analysis, all sorts of cool articles going up there all the time. Make sure to check out the shop where you can get some sweet merch. We got hats, we got t-shirts, we got tons of really cool stuff. And be sure to join the Patreon if you haven't already. $1.17 a month. That's all it takes to get access to exclusive content. The guys filmed a Q&A session yesterday where several of y'all submitted questions. So if you're in the Patreon, you can watch that. You also have access to our Discord, where we have some very intellectual conversations about soccer and so many other things that I've already lost track of. But that wraps up this week's episode of Across the Pitch. Jose, thank you so much for your time.
Absolutely, man. Anytime, Henry. I appreciate it.